Welcome back. Another week to learn and grow and develop and get better. And that's exactly what we're doing this week, covering the topic of principles and models to help you on your leadership journey. And this topic came about because of an experience. And what I've learned is that experiences lead to insight. And so often in life, we try to acquire things, we try to get more things. And while things aren't bad, it's often the experiences that we remember the most. Because those experiences lead to some insight or growth or memories that get imprinted into our mind. It could be a trip with your family that you think, I don't know if now the right time, but it imprints these memories that you'll have for a long time. It could be coaching a youth sports team. It's a lot of time to coach a youth sports team, but it creates an experience of memories that you will carry with you forever. It could be a new job. That could be an experience where you've been in the same job for a long time and you say, I need a new experience. I need to jump to a new learning curve. And that experience imprints new things into your journey that you can carry with you moving forward. Maybe what you want or what you don't want. Experiences matter. And just last week, I had the incredible opportunity to have an experience. And that experience was with an author named Jim Collins, who's probably best well known for his book, Good to Great, or How the Mighty Fall. And I've looked up to Jim for a long time. His research, his thought leadership, his writing. I've always had these people that I look up to help inspire me to get better and grow and create new ideas on my own. And so when I got the opportunity to go see Jim for a couple hours in Charlotte, North Carolina, I jumped at the opportunity. Now, just let's set the stage for this room. It's a big room and kind of a university style setting, almost an auditorium where Jim was at the bottom and everybody's sitting kind of up on a wall. And Jim basically taught for 2 or 3 hours in a traditional college/professor setting. And Jim just did an overarching job about the 12 questions that you could have and how to grow your business. He did some new content. He did some old content. But it got me thinking, I shouldn't just take these lessons in my own notes or in my own Evernote. I should actually share them with others to help them on their leadership journey, since many of you, probably none of you, were in that room. So what I thought we would do today is just simply dive into principles and model or ideas that can help you on your leadership journey from Jim's work and some of my own. All right, so let's jump right in. A principle is a concisely worded statement of truth that transcends circumstances. Concisely worded statement of truth that transcends circumstances. The best part about principles is it's not about the stories or the companies that Jim wrote about. It's about the principles that you can apply in your walk. That no matter if you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Cleveland, Ohio, or New York, it doesn't matter. The principle still exists. It is true. You can apply it in your leadership journey. A couple of my favorite principles. What leaders tolerate, they encourage. It doesn't matter if you're a first line manager or an executive. It's still true that what you tolerate, you encourage. It is a concisely worded statement of truth that transcends circumstances. I love this one. Leaders who use their time properly today create more time tomorrow. If you use your time and attention properly today, you can create more time tomorrow. You can't create more hours in a day, but you can create more space in those hours because you use your time and attention well today. And last one, I was teaching a workshop yesterday and I taught the principle motivation is going to wane, discipline is going to sustain. That is a principle that is tried and true. Your motivation is something that dwindles, but your discipline will sustain you as your motivation goes down, as you get tired. So we don't want to rely on our motivation. We want to rely on our discipline. Okay, 3 examples of principles, concisely worded statements of truth that transcends circumstances. It is true that these principles that I wrote about in Building the Best, or principles that Jim Collins writes about, are critical because you can use them and rely on them. So you don't have to worry about the story or inspiration. You can rely on the principles. Think of it as like first principle thinking, things that you can rely on to help you. My encouragement to you is to have a set of principles from a leadership perspective that you rely on and lean on to help you on your leadership journey, to make decisions and to lead teams more effectively. But today is actually not about principles. Today is about a model or an idea that you can use or latch onto to help you on your leadership journey. Again, I like to think of it this way. A model is a structured framework or approach that helps you understand, analyze, and apply concepts in real world situations. Now, not every idea has a model, but some do. Not every principle has a model, but some do. You can think of Simon Sinek's 3 golden circles. It was an idea that he had or that he had witnessed. He gleaned insight from his observation and it became a model. What, who, why. The center is why you do what you do. It became a model. Not every idea has a model, but what I thought would be useful is to go through 2 conceptual ideas and a couple models that Jim Collins teaches or taught me that would help you. Okay. The first one is about people. Every single leader in the room of 200 plus people cared about their talent on their team. I mean, he said, how many of you care about the talent on your team? Every single hand went up. So if you're a leader of a team or you're an executive in a company, you are constantly thinking about talent. You're thinking about who's right, who's wrong, what they need to get better at, what they need to improve upon, what they need to leave behind, how you need to upgrade the talent on your team. You're constantly thinking about talent and specifically the people on that team. So one of the models or ideas that Jim Collins and his research found was that in order for a company to go from good to great, it needed leaders. That's pretty obvious, you might think. But what Jim's research found out was it wasn't just any kind of leader. It's what he calls level 5 leaders. Now you can think of it, just bear with me for a second. You could have a leader, and for the sake of this, we'll define it. Jim uses the definition of leadership as the art of getting people to want to do what must be done. The art of getting people to want to do what must be done. I define leadership as someone whose actions inspire, empower, and serve in order to elevate others. Conceptually similar ideas of what it means to be a leader or leadership. But then when you think about those 2 definitions, you could think of them You could be doing that, but you just might not be doing it at a high enough level. You could be inspiring others or empowering others or serving others, but you might be doing it like at a level 1. Here's a good example. If you were to take a center in basketball, a college basketball center at a Division III school is a college basketball center. And he's a very, very good basketball player. You can't play in college without being a good basketball player. But he might be at a level 1 of college basketball centers, whereas the best player in the country might be at a level 5. But they're both centers in college basketball. So what Jim Collins and his team and the research found was that every company that was good had leaders. That was pretty consistent. But the ones that went from good to great had level 5 leaders. And he described it this way. He said, leadership, level 5 leadership isn't about a specific personality. It's about the paradoxical difference in having personal humility and professional will. It's about the paradoxical difference in having personal humility and professional will. Now you start to think, man, that's pretty. I always thought leaders were just rah-rah cheerleaders. They were inspirational. They were always on cloud 9. And Jim Collins says, no, actually, not every leader has the same personality. You have some leaders that turned around great companies that were quiet and reserved. You had some leaders that turned around great companies that were boisterous and inspirational. It's not about a personality. It is about having personal humility and professional will at the same time. Now, I like to think of it like this. C.S. Lewis said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. So if you're going to have personal humility, this isn't about pride or ego. This is about saying, I am a part of this. I am a big part, or I could be a big part in how we turn something around. I take personal responsibility for the things that I can control. But ultimately, I understand that it's not about me. It's about we. It's not about putting myself on a pedestal. I'm actually putting my team on a pedestal, and I'm at the bottom because I'm there in the service of them. That is personal humility. It's not thinking of yourself like I'm not good enough. It's in fact the opposite. It's saying I am good enough, and I'm willing and able to put myself at the bottom of that pyramid and lead for them because I know my responsibility. And unfortunately, many leaders or managers or executives in companies think the opposite. They put themselves on the pedestal and think everybody else works for me, and I'm going to either take advantage of them or use them to get where I need to go versus the other way around. So that is personal humility. But humility by itself, Jim Collins says, is not enough. What you also need is professional will. That is, I'm taking it up my professionalism to a level. I have great discernment, and I'm going to have an undeniable will to be successful. I'm going to be relentless. I'm going to be adaptable. I'm going to have this will to win or be successful. And that's going to help bring others along. That energy that I bring, that professional will, while also being humble. That's what a level 5 leader is all about to Jim Collins. Now, I don't know what level of leader you are today, but I do know that leadership is a journey and not a destination. And I also know that people aren't born level 5 leaders. They develop into them. People aren't born to inspire and empower and serve others to elevate others, they develop into that kind of leadership, which means I know you can develop into that kind of leadership. Does that mean you could be the greatest leader of all time? That I don't know. Leadership Quarterly says that 26% of us from a leadership perspective is genetic, something that we're born with. But that leaves 74% to be developed, to grow into, to become great, to lead with personal humility and professional will. Okay, so you have level 5 leadership as a model or an idea around people. But that's not enough. A lot of companies are thinking about level 5 leaders and how do I develop them and how do I create leadership development programs. But there was another idea or model around people that really grasped my attention. It was first who, then what. First who, then what. See, most organizations and leaders, what they think is, what do we need to do? Not who do we have to do it. So Jim Collins wants you to flip that upside down and always be looking through the lens of who first, then what. I'll use an example from the sports world. You could be thinking, hey, I need to know what to do as a coach in terms of the plays or the systems, and that's very important. But you would be better suited as a coach to think about who would be running these plays and then create the what or how we're going to do it in alignment with the skills or the people in the right seats of who's going to be running them. Or I'm going to adapt to the people that who I have running them. It's who before what. Most leaders don't think like this. He says you got to get the right people. Everybody says you got to get the right people on the bus. And Jim says, partly true. Yes, we need the right people on the bus, but more importantly, we need the right people in the right seats on the bus. So we got to think who before what. Who do we have on the bus and are they in the right seats? Now, he had this idea that I really thought was interesting. He called it the tilt to replace versus the tilt to develop. So when you start thinking of your organization and your people, when you think of who before what, when a leader fails, do you think in terms of we tilt to replace them with someone from the outside, or do we tilt to develop them into a better version of themselves? Now, we did some research in last week's newsletter, and we found that the majority of companies tilt to replace before tilt to develop, but it was like 60-40. So I'm not sure where your organization is today, and one way isn't right. You might have a blend of tilt to replace versus tilt to develop. But either way, you need a little bit of both, because if all you do is replace, your culture is going to be this churn and burn. Whereas if all you do is to develop, it might take too long, or you might not get there quick enough with some people growing and developing fast enough. So when you think about people, who before what, and I want you to consider your current company or team, do I have a tilt to replace or do I have a tilt to develop? Now, there was one last piece about people that really grasped my attention. And it was around this concept of tilt to develop versus tilt to replace. Jim said, don't get frustrated by what people are not. Find joy in what they are. Don't get frustrated by what people are not. Find joy in what they are. This stopped me in my tracks. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm one of the most positive thinkers I know. And I am amazed at how quickly I think about what people are not versus what they bring to the table. I think about their gaps before their gains. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe it's a spouse that you're constantly thinking about what they're not versus what they are. Maybe it's a kid. Think about what they're not versus what they are. Maybe it's a teammate at work, an employee on your team. Everything you're thinking about is what they do wrong versus what they do right. I'm not saying we need to ignore the gaps or completely ignore what they're not. But I think what Jim Collins is telling us here is that the best leaders find joy in what people are and lean into that to find them the right seat on the bus. Yes, they could opt out. Yes, might need to move on. But the first default would be to get them in the right seat on the bus, to use the gifts that they do have that they can bring to the team versus always looking at what they don't have and putting them on the bench somewhere that nobody knows where they are, or worse, kicking them off the team. Okay, there are your big ideas or models around people. But Jim Collins didn't stop there. We also talked about action. So you got the people that we're concerned with, and then we have to have disciplined action in those people to get great results, to go from good to great. Now, one of Jim's biggest ideas, I would say, is this idea of turning the flywheel as it relates to discipline action. And Jim talked at length about a story of Amazon in 2001, and everybody knows what Amazon is today, but back in 2001, they were really struggling, coming out of the dot-com era, not knowing if they were really going to make it. And this little entrepreneur named Jeff Bezos invited Jim Collins out to Washington to go through this concept of turning their flywheel. And what it became apparent to Jim while he was out there and then afterwards is that every company and every team needs to figure out what their flywheel is, or how to turn that flywheel to create disciplined action every single day. And what Jim would say is, just to give you an idea of what Amazon's flywheel is, or how he defined it, he had this little book or this little model made up. I'm going to read it to you. Amazon figured out that in order to push that flywheel a little bit every single day so it would turn naturally, they would just create this little flywheel of, in this case, 5 steps, and they called it Amazon.com flywheel. And the first part of the flywheel was lower prices on more offerings. Lower prices on more offerings. If we did that, then the only natural next step would be that we would get an increase in customer visits. Think about it. My lower prices on more offerings, people are going to automatically be attracted there. More people are going to come to the site. So the next natural step after more people come to the site is that attracts third-party sellers, because third-party sellers want to go where the audience is to sell their products. And then once we have attracted third-party sellers, the next natural step is that we would expand the store and we would extend the distribution. We'd have more things to offer. And once we have more things to offer and we have extended distribution, then our gross revenue per fixed cost would go up. And the cycle would go over and over and over again. Now, I don't know what discipline action or what your flywheel is on your team or your company, but I love this idea of the flywheel for one big reason. He says it's not just a next steps action list. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the inevitable consequence of the step that came before. It's the inevitable consequence of the step that came before. If we did this, this automatically is going to happen. That's how the flywheel works. It's not just a logical step. It's, if we do this extremely well, the inevitable consequence of this is the next thing in the flywheel. So again, this is hard work. Go get it. Turning the flywheel. There's a lot of great insight into that. If you're trying to get more disciplined action on your team about thinking about the flywheel effect and turning it so it becomes automatic. Performance becomes automatic. Okay. So you have turning the flywheel, and here's how we'll close. There was a story around disciplined action that just absolutely was fantastic. And I've read about it, but I'd forgotten about it. And it's called the 20-mile march. 20-mile march. And in 1911, two groups were going to the South Pole, and they met at the same location. They left at the same time. They had almost similar talent. They had all the same resources, but one team got to the summit 35 days before the other team. 35 days. And that team that got to the summit 35 days before the other team also came back 100% alive. The other team that left on the same day, that got there 35 days later, on their return home, every single one of them perished. And it's called the 20-mile march. And here's why. The team that was successful, that got there the quickest, and where everybody survived, believed in something called the 20-mile march. That no matter the circumstance, no matter the weather conditions, we were going to march 20 miles every single day and then set up camp. Now, the other team had a different philosophy. They had the philosophy of, on nice days, we'll walk 60. On bad days, we'll stay in our tent. When the wind was at our back, we'll walk 40. When the wind was against us, we'll walk 5. They didn't believe in the 20-mile march. They believed in the go as hard and as fast as you can when it's convenient or when it's nice. But the team that was successful, they knew that it was the 20-mile march, the disciplined action every single day, that we were just going to go 20, whether it was hard or whether it was easy. That's just what we did. We went 20 miles every single day. And they were successful. So if you want to turn the flywheel, if you want disciplined action on your team, the question that I want you to think about is, what's your 20-mile march? What are the things that we do every single day? What's our 20 miles that we do every single day, regardless if it's nice or not, whether the market's in our favor or it's not? Because what we do is we go 20 miles every single day. What's your 20-mile march? It's my hope that some of these ideas and principles from myself and, most importantly, Jim Collins, help you on your leadership journey. Until next time, be a great leader at work and at home.